The American Old West Saloon, few icons of frontier life conjure up such vivid imagery. From swinging doors to the clink of whiskey glasses and the raucous hum of poker games, saloons have been romanticized in movies and stories for generations. But how much of what we think we know is actually true? Were they truly the wild, lawless watering holes of legend? Or was reality a bit more grounded? Step inside the real world of Old West saloons, where truth and myth collide in surprising ways. If you're thirsty for more fascinating tales of the Old West, hit that subscribe button and join us as we uncover the hidden truths of frontier life. Sometimes too much to drink is barely enough. Mark Twain. The story of the Old West cannot be told without delving into its saloons, a cornerstone of frontier life. These establishments were more than just places to grab a drink. They became enduring symbols of the American frontier. The mere mention of the word saloon conjures vivid images. A rustic wooden facade with a false front, a wide boardwalk lining a dusty street, hitching posts for horses, and those iconic swinging doors that seem to beckon cowboys seeking a shot of whiskey to quench their thirst. This imagery is rooted in legend, but the truth reveals a far more complex and evolving picture. Saloons were quick to follow, or even precede, the pioneers who ventured into the West. As settlers established outposts and towns across the vast frontier, saloons emerged to serve the needs of trappers, traders, soldiers, cowboys, and miners. Early on, much of the West lacked permanent structures, so saloons were often humble affairs, consisting of makeshift tents or ramshackle lean-tos. These primitive establishments served as gathering spots where weary travelers could exchange stories, frontier deals were brokered, and soldiers or miners could unwind. Despite their rough beginnings, saloons were integral to the social fabric of the Old West. One of the earliest known saloons, Brown's Saloon, was founded in 1822 near Brown's Hole, a remote area at the intersection of modern-day Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. Catering to fur trappers during the height of the fur trade, Brown's Saloon was a precursor to the saloons that would later spring up in greater numbers as the West expanded. Soldiers stationed at frontier posts were also early patrons of saloons, with establishments like the one at Bent's Fort in Colorado emerging by the late 1820s. These early saloons may not have resembled the romanticized versions seen in movies, but they played an essential role in the day-to-day lives of those living on the edge of civilization. As the gold rushes of the mid-19th century drew thousands westward, saloons became indispensable fixtures in mining towns. For example, Santa Barbara, California, had only one cantina before gold was discovered in the region in 1848. Within a few short years, however, the influx of miners transformed the settlement into a bustling hub, boasting over 30 saloons. Similarly, Dodge City, Kansas, became infamous for its rowdy saloons, which catered to cowboys driving cattle along the trails. By 1883, even smaller towns like Livingston, Montana, with a population of just 3,000, supported 33 saloons, illustrating the rapid growth of these establishments. As settlements became more established, saloons evolved from their crude beginnings into the iconic venues we now associate with the Old West. They acquired the classic trappings of the era: polished wooden bars, mirrors behind the counter, spittoons on the floor, and ornate decor aimed at impressing patrons. Beyond offering drinks, saloons became centers of entertainment and commerce, hosting card games, gambling, and sometimes musical performances. They were places where people from all walks of life intersected: cowboys, gamblers, prospectors, and even women seeking independence in a male-dominated frontier. In many ways, the saloon was a microcosm of the West itself, rough around the edges, constantly changing, and brimming with possibilities. In the rugged days of the Old West, the whiskey poured in saloons was often far from refined. Made from raw alcohol mixed with burnt sugar and sometimes chewing tobacco, this concoction earned a reputation for its potency and harshness. Unsurprisingly, such fiery brews were given colorful and intimidating names like Tanglefoot, 40 Rod, Tarantula Juice, Taos Lightning, Red Eye, and Coffin Varnish. These weren't just drinks, they were experiences and not always pleasant ones. Despite their rough quality, these spirits were staples of saloon life, fueling conversations and camaraderie among patrons. Beyond whiskey, saloons offered other unconventional options for the adventurous drinker. Cactus wine, for instance, combined tequila with peyote tea, offering a unique, albeit intense, flavor profile. Mule Skinner, a mix of whiskey and blackberry liqueur, was another popular choice for those seeking variety. For many, however, the standard rot gut whiskey was the go-to, often at a staggering 100 proof. This potent drink was sometimes diluted by saloon keepers with additives such as turpentine, ammonia, or cayenne pepper, stretching their supply but not improving the taste. The term firewater, commonly used to describe saloon liquor, has its origins in early trading practices. Traders selling whiskey to Native Americans would demonstrate its strength by pouring some onto a fire, causing the flames to leap. This dramatic display gave rise to the evocative nickname, which persisted as a symbol of the drink's fiery nature. Despite the availability of cocktails, most saloon-goers preferred their spirits straight, typically rye or bourbon. Ordering anything more elaborate, like a cocktail, was often seen as pretentious unless the individual had already earned respect within the saloon. Social dynamics played a significant role in these establishments, shaping what was considered acceptable behavior for regulars and newcomers alike. Beer, another saloon staple, had its own set of quirks in the Old West. Unlike today's crisp, chilled brews, beer was usually served at temperatures ranging from 55 to 65 degrees. This was largely due to the lack of refrigeration, as ice was a luxury in many frontier towns. Although the beer had a frothy head, it lacked the carbonation and fizz associated with modern brewing. Patrons often drank quickly, lest their beer grow too warm or lose its flavor. The 1880s marked a turning point with Adolphus Busch introducing refrigeration and pasteurization to brewing in the United States. These advancements not only extended the shelf life of beer, but also popularized brands like Budweiser, which became a national phenomenon. Before this innovation, Old West drinkers adhered to European traditions, where room temperature beer was the norm. Saloons were more than places to drink. They were social hubs where entertainment and risk converged. Almost every mining camp, cattle town, or frontier settlement had a saloon featuring a poker table. Around these tables, a mix of prospectors, cowboys, lawmen, railroad workers, soldiers, and others would gather to test their luck. The games were as much about social interaction as they were about winning, reflecting the spirit of competition and the search for fortune that defined the West. In every way, the saloon was a reflection of its time, full of grit, ingenuity, and an undeniable sense of community, even amid the chaos of the Wild West. Faro reigned as the most popular and widespread card game in Old West saloons, drawing crowds eager to test their luck. Close behind were other favorites such as Brag, three-card Monte, and dice games like High-Low, Chuck-a-Luck, and Grand Hazard. These games weren't merely pastimes. They became central to saloon culture, offering both excitement and the potential for fortune. Mining towns like Deadwood, Leadville, and Tombstone became synonymous not only with their rich gold and silver deposits, but also with the intensity of their gambling scenes. Card tables were magnets for drama, and disputes often escalated, fueled by the high stakes and emotional investments of the players. Professional gamblers, such as Doc Holliday and Wild Bill Hickok, honed their skills to thrive in this high-pressure environment. For them, gambling wasn't just about strategy and chance. It was about composure, reputation, and a certain charisma that drew others to the table. These men epitomized the archetype of the Old West gambler, blending calculated risk-taking with a flair for showmanship. The tension at the green felt tables was palpable, as success or failure could be determined in a single hand. As the West expanded, so did the variety of saloons. They catered to nearly every interest imaginable. There were gambling saloons, billiard saloons, dance hall saloons, restaurant saloons, and even saloons featuring bowling lanes. Of course, the classic drinking saloon remained a constant fixture. Each establishment aimed to stand out, often adopting memorable names such as the First Chance Saloon in Miles City, Montana, the Bull's Head in Abilene, Kansas, and the Holy Moses in Creede, Colorado. In larger towns, saloons became 24-hour operations, welcoming patrons day and night. Some didn't even bother with locking doors, underscoring their perpetual availability. The interiors of these saloons were as iconic as their exteriors. At the heart of nearly every saloon was a long, polished bar, typically crafted from rich woods like oak or mahogany. These bars gleamed with care, reflecting the pride saloon keepers took in their establishments. At the base of the bar, a brass foot rail offered a resting spot for patrons, while spittoons were strategically placed along the floor. Towels hung along the bar's edge, allowing patrons to clean beer foam from their mustaches, an essential touch for maintaining their appearance amidst the camaraderie of the saloon. Gambling was an essential element of saloon life, and patrons could reliably find games like faro, chuck-a-luck, and three-card monte. Poker, in particular, became a staple, with games often running continuously. The decor of these saloons varied, reflecting the character of their surroundings and clientele. In prairie cow towns, walls were often adorned with steer horns, saddles, and spurs, celebrating the cowboy lifestyle. In mountainous regions, the gaze of taxidermied deer or elk greeted patrons, offering a nod to the rugged outdoors. Many saloons featured a painting of a nude woman behind the bar, a detail that became infamous and symbolized the era's daring. In their heyday, saloons were more than just places to drink. They were community hubs, entertainment centers, and reflections of the aspirations and culture of the Old West. One question that frequently arises about Old West saloons is whether they were truly adorned with those iconic swinging doors. Known as cafe doors, or sometimes referred to as batwing doors, they were indeed present in many saloons, but were far less common than Hollywood would have us believe. In movies, these doors make for dramatic entrances, perfect for heroes to stride through or for unruly patrons to be theatrically ejected. Cafe doors are functional in design, equipped with bidirectional hinges that allow movement both ways. Positioned mid-frame, they were shorter than full-size doors, making them practical for several reasons. These doors facilitated easy entry and exit, while helping to reduce the amount of dust carried in from the streets. They also allowed light and air to pass through, aiding ventilation in often smoky and crowded saloons. Another key feature was that cafe doors offered a partial screen of privacy, obscuring the activities inside from the view of passers-by, particularly women who might walk by and frown upon the saloon's less than proper proceedings. However, many saloons opted for more traditional, full-height doors. Even establishments that featured swinging doors typically had a second, sturdier set to secure the premises during closing hours and to provide better insulation against inclement weather. On the other hand, some rougher saloons in small towns or mining camps had no doors at all. These establishments were often open around the clock, catering to a continuous flow of customers. The atmosphere in such places was informal, and regular patrons became fixtures, often leaning heavily on the bar for hours. So common was this practice that it wasn't unusual for frequent customers to develop calluses on their elbows from resting them on the polished wooden surfaces. Social drinking in the Old West was a communal activity, and men typically avoided drinking alone or at home. Saloon patrons sought out companionship, forming a diverse crowd that included miners, cowboys, gamblers, adventurers, and laborers. However, the social inclusivity of saloons had clear limits. People of color, particularly Native Americans, were systematically excluded. Laws explicitly banned Native Americans from entering most saloons, and racial prejudices created a hostile environment for others. Black men might occasionally find a degree of acceptance, particularly if they were well-known gamblers or figures in the community. However, Chinese patrons faced extreme discrimination, and entering a saloon could place them in grave danger. Interestingly, even some white men encountered hostility in saloons. Soldiers were among those frequently unwelcome. This animosity stemmed from the independent mindset of many Western men, who viewed soldiers as representatives of authority and discipline, qualities often scorned by the adventurous and free-spirited individuals who populated the frontier. Many saloon regulars, including Civil War deserters, former outlaws, and those disenchanted with Eastern society, had little respect for the structured life of a soldier. Additionally, there was a persistent, albeit unfounded belief that soldiers were responsible for spreading illnesses, to the women working in parlor houses, further tarnishing their reputation in the eyes of saloon patrons. Saloons, with their varied clientele and unique social codes, reflected the complexities of life in the Old West. They were spaces of camaraderie, conflict, and cultural boundaries, offering a glimpse into the dynamic and often challenging interactions of the era. In the social landscape of the Old West, respectable women were generally unwelcome in saloons. Unless a woman worked as a saloon girl or held a reputation as a shady lady, she was expected to steer clear of these establishments. This tradition of excluding women persisted well into the early 20th century, gradually fading after World War I. Women, however, found ways to push back against the dominance of saloons in social life, with many becoming active leaders in the prohibition movement. This crusade wasn't just about temperance, it reflected a broader effort by women to challenge spaces where they had long been marginalized. For men, the saloon was a private, almost sacred space governed by unspoken rules. One such custom was a lack of curiosity about another man's background. Asking too many questions, even as simple as inquiring about a first name, was considered impolite and could quickly sour social interactions. This tacit agreement to leave the past unspoken was essential in a region where many carried secrets or wished to escape their former lives. The same code extended to personal topics such as finances. For instance, it was deeply offensive to ask a rancher the size of his herd, a question as intrusive as asking someone to reveal their tax records today. Another social expectation in saloons was the tradition of offering to buy a drink for the man standing next to you. Failing to do so, especially as a newcomer, was likely to draw questions about your intentions or character. Refusing a drink, even if the quality of the liquor left much to be desired, was seen as an outright insult. That said, compassion often tempered these customs. If a man openly admitted he was broke and asked for a drink, he was usually accommodated out of goodwill. However, trying to trick others by ordering a drink without the means to pay could lead to trouble, as honesty was highly valued in such interactions. Saloons weren't merely watering holes, they often served as multifunctional spaces in new settlements. These establishments were frequently among the first and largest buildings in town, making them natural venues for public gatherings. For example, Judge Roy Bean famously operated both his courtroom and saloon under the same roof, blurring the lines between law and leisure. Similarly, in Downeyville, California, the most popular saloon doubled as the office of the Justice of the Peace. Even religious gatherings sometimes took place in saloons, such as the first church services in Hays City, Kansas, held at Tommy Drum's Saloon. Notable figures of the Old West often found themselves tied to saloons in various capacities. Many legendary names, including Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and Bat Masterson, owned, managed, or worked in saloons at some point. Whether tending bar, dealing cards, or overseeing the establishment, these individuals contributed to the colorful history of the saloon as both a social hub and a reflection of life on the frontier. Among the many defining features of Old West saloons, perhaps none was more prevalent or more deeply ingrained than the violence that often erupted within their walls. These establishments, where potent whiskey flowed freely, were frequently the site of tragic confrontations. As Bob Younger famously put it in 1876, "We are rough men and used to rough ways," a sentiment that spoke to the raw and often lawless nature of the times. Given the public access to these drinking houses, the unregulated flow of alcohol, and the general absence of strict law enforcement, saloons became powder kegs ready to explode at any moment. Several well-known figures met their end in saloons, reinforcing their association with sudden violence. For instance, Wild Bill Hickok was tragically shot in the back while playing poker at the No. 10 Saloon in Deadwood, South Dakota, by the disgruntled Jack McCall. Similarly, Bob Ford, the man who killed Jesse James, was himself shot in the back while in his own saloon in Creede, Colorado. Another infamous incident occurred in 1895 when John Wesley Hardin, a notorious gunslinger, was shot from behind in an El Paso saloon. Many other violent events, fueled by alcohol and heated emotions, led to deadly shootouts in the streets or public executions carried out by vigilante groups. These acts of violence were part of the harsh reality of the Wild West, where tensions often boiled over in these public spaces. However, the saloon was not just a place for violence. It also housed another key figure in the social fabric of the Old West, the saloon or dance hall girl. Contrary to popular belief, these women were not often prostitutes, although such behavior did exist in the less reputable establishments. Most saloon girls were entertainers, hired to sing, dance, and provide company to the men who sought refuge in the saloon after a long day's work. Their role was to add a spark to the otherwise gritty and often lonely environment, encouraging patrons to buy drinks and participate in games. Though often stigmatized by more respectable women, saloon girls were typically not involved in the more degrading aspects of the profession. In fact, they took pride in the distinction between their work and that of prostitutes, avoiding association with women of ill repute. Not all saloons employed women in this role. In towns like Dodge City, the north side of Front Street was a more respectable area where gambling and the presence of saloon girls were prohibited. Instead, these establishments offered music and billiards as the primary amusements to accompany the drinks. The women who worked as saloon girls often came from difficult backgrounds, many of them fleeing the hardships of farm life or industrial mills. Some were widows or women from modest backgrounds, seeking a way to support themselves in a time when opportunities for women were few and far between. Advertisements promising high wages and easy work in saloons attracted these women, who were looking for a means to survive in a world that offered few choices for women without a husband or family support. During the height of the Old West, saloon girls could earn as much as $10 per week, a significant sum for the time. In addition to their base earnings, they made a commission on the drinks they sold. While the customer paid full price for whiskey, often between 10 and 75 cents per shot, the girls themselves were typically served only cold tea or colored sugar water in place of the alcohol. This markup was part of the saloon's business model, with drinks for the women priced 30 to 60% higher than the wholesale cost, benefiting both the girls and the saloon owner. The interaction between saloon girls and their customers often followed a strict code of propriety, reflecting a mix of respect and protection. Western men, by and large, revered women, and this extended to the saloon girls. These women were generally treated with courtesy and respect by the men who frequented the saloons, as any mistreatment would result in severe social consequences. A man who insulted or disrespected a saloon girl risked social ostracism and, in extreme cases, retaliation that could be fatal. Though society's respectable women might scorn the saloon girls, the girls could count on the respect of their male patrons. This respect was not limited to their work, but extended to their personal dignity. The saloon girls, in turn, often viewed their counterparts, the hard-working wives and mothers, differently. Many of them found it difficult to understand why these women subjected themselves to grueling labor on farms, raising children, tending animals, and helping their husbands with the physical demands of agricultural life. For the saloon girls, their work was a more practical, albeit socially complicated, form of survival. The California Gold Rush of 1849 brought a new wave of saloons and dance halls to the booming mining towns. These venues often centered around dancing as the main attraction, alongside games of chance. Men would pay between 75 cents and $1 for the opportunity to dance with the women, with the proceeds shared between the dancer and the saloon owner. After the dance, the saloon girl would typically direct the gentleman to the bar, where she would earn additional money from drink sales. This blend of entertainment and commerce was a cornerstone of many saloons across the West. Today, the legacy of the Old West saloon can still be seen in how various women are perceived in the service industry. The professional woman, often looking down on the bar waitress, who in turn may look down on the modern-day prostitute, mirrors the class distinctions and social judgments that were present in the Old West. While the specific practices of gambling and spitting may have disappeared, the tavern or bar remains a central establishment in society, largely unaffected by economic downturns. It continues to serve as a place where people gather, conduct business, and find brief respite from the pressures of life, much like the saloons of the past. To truly understand the Old West, we must look beyond the Hollywood glamorization and into the gritty reality of saloons. These lively establishments were the heart of Western towns, serving as more than just bars. They were entertainment hubs, gambling dens, and sometimes the pulse of a community. While the rowdy reputation was certainly earned, these venues also provided a sense of escape, a place for camaraderie, and, occasionally, an unexpected moment of respect or grace. If you've enjoyed this glimpse into the real Old West Saloon experience, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating insights into the untold stories of America's frontier. Hit that bell icon to stay updated, and let's continue exploring the wild, untamed history of the West together.